Hare Krishna. Grateful to be here with all of you today. And I'll be speaking today on the topic of spiritual growth. Now, what does spiritual growth mean? I hope this will be a whiteboard for me. Are you able to see it from there? Okay. So, what it is, why it matters, and how it can be achieved. So, we'll discuss these three questions shortly. What does spiritual growth actually mean? And I'll discuss this based on the Bhagavad-gita 7.1, where Krishna says, Maya Sattamana Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Asamshayam Samagrama Yatha Gyasasi Tachrunu. Krishna says, I will tell you how you can know me in full and become attached to me. Hear that process. So throughout this talk at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And toward the end also, we'll have some time for questions. So spiritual growth, if you consider this is the path of spiritual growth. So if we are individuals here, initially when we are on the spiritual journey, say if this is the world is in front of us, we are facing it, and that seems to be a big reality for us. And even if we believe in some spiritual reality, we believe in God, God is a small reality. So, if we believe in God, God is the smallest, the world is what really matters. This is the starting. This is the stage where a person becomes a seeker. But as we grow spiritually, as we become seers, God becomes the bigger reality. And the world becomes a smaller reality. That our relationship with the Lord becomes much more important for us than how the world perceives us or what we do in the world. So, in Bhakti, the idea is, especially in the Bhakti path of spiritual growth, it is a process of realization that as we grow, our understanding of God's greatness, of God, not just greatness, His relevance in our lives, that starts becoming more and more. When I was introduced to Bhakti around 25 years ago, at that time I started sharing Bhakti with my relatives. And then I was talking with my uncle, and he said, I believe in God. He's happy there, I'm happy here. Let it be as it is. I don't need anything to do with him, he doesn't need anything to do with me. But so here, when God is so small, either at this stage, initially, we could go at the seeker stage or even below the seeker stage. We may think of God, some people may think of it as a non-existent, or even think his existence, he is irrelevant. I was in UK, they asked me to give a talk, God exists, so what? Or even the spiritual domain exists. Some of us may be a little uncomfortable with the specific word God. But he says the spiritual, okay, maybe spiritual stuff is real, so what? It becomes either non-existent or irrelevant. And so it's irrelevant for me means I have no interest in God. But there's another way God may be small for us. That we may think of God as uncaring, as non-benevolent. Okay. So I am not interested in him and he is not interested in me. So if either of these ideas is there, then God is, or any higher spiritual reality, whatever be the term we use for it, it becomes basically as if like a non-entity. So when there is materialism. So materialism can be of two broad types. There is functional materialism and there is fanatical materialism. So, what does fanatical materialism mean? It means matter is all that exists. There is nothing beyond matter. So, everything, including even our experience of emotions like love, they're all just firings of chemicals in our brain. When a mother sees a newborn baby, she feels a flood of love. What is that? Oh, it's nothing, just some chemicals are firing in the brain. This is functional materialism. This is fanatical materialism, not functional, where matter is all that exists. Now, even people who are very materialistic, philosophically they are materialistic, but relationally no one lives like that. Because we care for emotions, we care for meaning in our life, and matter itself does not have much emotions or meaning. It's all basically an illusion. So I'm not going to, it's not a critique of materialism, we're just trying to understand what spiritual growth is. Functional materialism is matter is all that matters. Maybe something else might exist, but it doesn't matter. What matters is material things. So, for example, how much money I have, how much reputation I have nowadays, how many followers I have on Instagram or TikTok. Uh, these are the things that really matter. Everything else is immaterial. That's the idea. This is the stage where most people live. And from there, when one grows spiritually, one starts realizing that, okay, these things are not that important. They're important, but they're not that important. There are other things which are more important. So, when there is authentic, when I talk about authentic spiritual growth, just talking about spirituality, maybe even coming to spiritual places, even doing some spiritual practices, those are good, but they themselves may not lead to spiritual growth. Actual spiritual growth means the world becomes less important for us, not unimportant. And in the Bhakti philosophy, the world is not considered illusion. The world is also real. But the world becomes a less important reality than the divine, who is the source of the world. So this is broadly what spiritual growth is, where what is more important for us changes. Now, why should one seek spiritual growth at all? If someone asks you, that you are interested in spirituality, or you want someone to become interested in spirituality, you want your friends, relatives, someone to maybe adopt some spiritual practices, come to a spiritual program, what would you say? Why should anyone seek spiritual growth? What do you think? Anyone like to share? Why does spiritual growth matter at all? Yes.
Because it's our real existence.
Okay. Why? Because that's our real existence. Yes. Thank you. Now, one concern with this is that people may not accept that. They may say, this is real, that is just imaginary. So we'll discuss that. But that's one reason, that's true, real existence. Yes. If there is no such answer, can you just tell your name and then you can answer? Yes.
Victoria, self-realization.
Self-realization. What exactly do you mean by self-realization?
I guess realizing the true nature of the soul.
Of the soul. Okay, that's good. Let's say, why does it matter? If somebody is at functional level of materialism, matter is all that matters. Maybe there is a soul, maybe there is not a soul. Why does it really matter? I agree with you, but I'm just playing a devil's advocate slightly over here. So we are trying to find out how we can both communicate the reason for spiritual growth in a way that even an ordinary person can relate with it. Yes, there are definitely many people who are interested in self-realization, but majority are not, isn't it? if say I was just in Laguna Beach, I say, would you like to gain self-realization? You say, oh, I just want to play on the beach. Isn't it? That's what most people would say. Yeah, I agree with you. But you want to add something?
To lessen suffering.
To lessen suffering. Okay, that's a good one. Now, let's explore this. The spiritual growth. One of the reasons why people turn towards spirituality is because they are in distress. Yes, thank you. We'll explore these reasons later. Yes, please. Okay. Peace of mind. Yes. Basically, we live in a world where there's a lot of agitation. Our anxiety and mental health problems are becoming alarming. So we want some peace of mind. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please. Satisfaction. Real. Yes. Okay, we can put it as real satisfaction. Now, of course, somebody could say that, I get real satisfaction in going trekking up the mountain. I go get real satisfaction in painting, hanging out with friends. It's true, but let's explore this. The spirituality gives us real satisfaction. Yes, thank you. Yes, please.
It gives us tools to deal with suffering.
Yes, lessen suffering, you could say tools to deal with suffering. Thank you. Very nice. We'll come to that. Yes, please. Sorry? Ultimate truth. So this is something similar to the real existence. That is, spirituality takes us to the ultimate truth. The world around us, it's there, but it's temporary. It's youth, wealth, all these pass away. So this is ultimate truth. Yes. Thank you. You want to say something? Please.
Yeah, out of curiosity to explore what if there is anything beyond what we perceive.
Yes, curiosity. Yeah. There is. We are by nature curious people, so we may explore geography, we may explore history, we may explore psychology, we may explore spirituality. Now, not everyone may have that curiosity, but that's one natural impetus which gets some people at least on the spiritual path. Yes, someone.
Let's say, coming to terms with our mortality.
Okay, so you see, spirituality helps us to come to terms with our mortality.
We're going to die someday, so how do we understand?
Okay.
A lot of people live in fear of.
So facing our mortality, when we face our mortality, that makes us get some questions. Okay, what is life all about? Thank you. Good one.
To stop repeated birth and death.
Yes. See now here, it's a good answer. This is a good example of an answer that is both good and not so good. It is good because from the philosophical perspective, it is perfectly true. But for most people, new people, they don't even know that I'm a cycle of birth and death. I think this life is all that I have. I begin and I end and it's over. So, yes, from a philosophical perspective, it is correct, yes. But we could say, you could put it over here. Stop samsara chakra. Okay. Yes, I'm okay. Yeah, please. Yeah, so we could say here, real satisfaction is everlasting happiness. So, definitely. Now, of course, somebody could say that the idea that there is everlasting happiness, as I said, is questionable. Maybe people tell that this world is an illusion, and they say the idea of everlasting happiness is an illusion. That's just your imagination. So, yes, I'm not rejecting any of these. All of these are valid. But we're just trying to see how we can communicate effectively the importance of spiritual growth. Yes, please. You had an answer? Yeah, please. To find our purpose. Yes. So, what is it that we are meant for in life? Thank you. Yes. You one or two more answers, please. Yeah.
To establish a connection
Connection with?
something deeper, something that materialism just doesn't sell.
Okay, so could put it here something like that. It's something related to satisfaction, but a connection with something bigger. And so for many people, that is their idea of spirituality. Say if they go climb up a mountain and they see the huge mountain, they feel, oh, I feel spiritual, I feel there's something bigger in here. There's something bigger that exists. Yes, that's true. Thank you. Yes, please.
Searching for answers to your questions, like about karma,
Okay, so
why things happen.
we may seek answers to life's questions. So yes. Now, not everybody has the big questions all the time, but everybody gets that sometime or the other in their lives. So, the answer when we seek answers to life's questions. Thank you. These are all. You can see that all of you have put in thought, and you are putting in thought right now. So, these are all valid reasons for spiritual growth, for seeking spiritual growth. Now, I try to put these into three broad categories to understand how we can, why spiritual growth matters. Okay? So, the first we could say is a certain level of steadiness. Life can be very destabilizing and disorienting. That things can change very rapidly. This is related with, say, peace of mind, which you talked about. One of the main reasons why people seek something spiritual is that they want to feel some kind of calmness. And that calmness comes by connection with something bigger. So it's like by steadiness, what I mean is that the world we live in is like an ocean. And in that ocean, there are these waves which keep coming. And we have happiness, distress, honor, dishonor, health, disease, love. We have sometimes union in love, sometimes we have separation, disappointment, betrayal, breakdown, a breakup. The word is break up, but most times people break down. Nobody goes up after a breakup, unfortunately. But so life always has these ups and downs. And now these can make us very unstable. And especially sometimes these ups and downs, they can be much more severe. And we can just feel totally buffeted. And sometimes you may find that there's only an occasional up and there's only down and down and down. I think my life is just becoming worse and worse and worse. So basically, when we feel ourselves buffeted by the ups and downs of life, that's when we look for some steadiness. Okay, is there something that can stabilize me? So the more things change, the more we seek something that does not change. Is there something like that at all? We may not even believe. But is there something like that? One of the ways we deal with change is by having something secure that will not change. Say, for example, I have a job today, I may not have a job tomorrow. So the way I have security is that maybe I save some money in my bank. So my job may go, but the money in the bank will be there. Or what if the bank itself crashes? Then maybe I decide I'll have some property with me. But what if property doesn't go? I may seek health, but our health can go down, then I may have health insurance. So basically, we often try to have something to hold on to face the changes of life or the ever-changing nature of life. And this is where spiritual growth can actually help us find an anchor. So if I'm here, no matter how much I try, if a giant wave comes, I'll be tossed away in the ocean. But if somehow I can get something like a large anchor to hold on to, then the wave will still hit me. But the more I hold on to the anchor, the less I'll be affected by it. And how many of you have had this experience, let's say, after you started practicing spirituality, that maybe the same thing which had earlier disturbed you a lot, now it didn't disturb you that much? Any of you had that experience? Yes, thank you. It's a very transformative experience if we get that. That, yes, in life, there is no insurance against bad things happening. They'll happen to everyone. But what spirituality does is, spirituality does not promise us a stormless sea, but it gives us an unshakable anchor. And that unshakable anchor is this link. We hold on to the anchor. That anchor ultimately is the divine, is God, is Krishna. And we train ourselves to hold the anchor. And that is the process of Bhakti. It's called Bhakti Yoga. Yoga means connection. So the more we learn, say, to chant the names of Krishna, we come to the temple and worship Krishna, we study the wisdom given by Krishna, all of these can act as anchors for us, by which when life's ups and downs come, they won't throw us around so much. So that's steadiness. So basically, I'll talk about spiritual growth also in multiple terms. And initially, most people seek spiritual growth as a shock absorber. Life gives us many shocks in life. Shocks, unfortunately. And we want something that can soften the blow. And it is true that spiritual practice will do that for us. Distress will still be there in everyone's life. But in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, Mat chittaha sarva durgani, mat prasadat tarishyasi. He says that if you become conscious of me, you will pass over all obstacles by my grace. So basically what he means is that if we consider this is our consciousness, and then there is some shock that has come. Now that shock can almost fill our consciousness. That shock could be we may get a bad health diagnosis, our relationship may break down, maybe there is the economy goes down and then there's retrenchment in our company. Many things can go wrong. These are shocks. So now if we practice spirituality, the result of that is, by spiritual practice, that problem may still be there, but the problem will become smaller. It will not seem that shattering or devastating a problem. So at this level, so here we are living in pain. But here we are living with pain. The problem is there, the problem is not gone away. But living in pain means that is the only experience that or that is a defining experience of our life. But when we seek spiritual growth, when we get that anchor, we understand that, okay, these things come, they stay for some time, they go. Life goes on. And therefore I don't need to get that worked up by this. So how does spiritual growth provide us this steadiness? I'll talk about that in the later part, the final part of the talk. But initially, we seek spiritual growth as a shock absorber. And that is good. In the Bhakti tradition it says, somehow or the other, if we try to fix our mind on the Lord, that is good. So for example, we may have a very bad argument with someone and we feel, This is very important for us, but the relationship has gone south. This is my whole world is coming crashing. But say we come to a spiritual place like this, and there's nice kirtan going on, and it's like participating in kirtan. Slowly our mind starts to peace. Okay, that all things may be going wrong, but there is something that still gives me shelter. There is something that is like anchor for me. So the problem is there that its magnitude decreases. So initially we seek spiritual growth as a shock absorber. But over a period of time, spiritual growth we seek because it becomes a goal transformer. A goal transformer means that initially we all, by default, by living in this material world, we are materialists. We may not be fanatically materialistic, but we will be functionally materialistic. So I want wealth, I want success, I want fame, I want possessions. That's just something which naturally happens. And that's okay. That's what we think is really matters in life. And even when we feel that way, that's okay. But we feel I need some spiritual shelter. Because the pursuit of all these things can be so agitating. So I need something to calm me down. I was just in the Bay Area before I came here to LA. So there, many times I'm invited to speak in Google or Intel, this kind of spoken Salesforce. And they are not really interested in spirituality for spirituality's sake. What they're interested in is spirituality is a shock absorber for their employees. That when people get stressed, people become dysfunctional because of the challenges of work pressure or work-life balance or whatever. So some spiritual practices can act as a shock absorber. So what is the difference between spirituality as a shock absorber and spirituality as a goal transformer? The key difference is that now in the spiritual growth, it can mean many things. Now basically there is this material domain, material level of reality, and there is a spiritual level of reality. And that spiritual level of reality, there is the highest reality, that is God, Krishna, who exists over there. Now this is one understanding, it's a valid understanding. However, a more complete understanding is that God doesn't just exist up there in the spiritual domain. God exists everywhere. The divine is present in our hearts also. The divine is everywhere. Of course, the divine is most manifest in the spiritual domain. Sometimes people ask that, okay, you can feel the divine presence anywhere. Why do you need to come to a temple? Yeah, we can feel. But the fact is, do we feel? It's like when I'm thirsty, we can say water exists everywhere as water vapor. But when I'm thirsty, I can't just hang out my tongue and expect water vapor to quench my thirst. Then I need to go to a place where the water vapor has been transformed into water that I can drink. So a tap, for example. So while the divine and the spiritual is present everywhere, but the spiritual is not perceivable that easily everywhere. That's why there are particular places we go to experience the presence, we adopt particular practices. But the point I'm making over here is, let's say initially, so I still want to grow in this direction. I want to go bigger, grow in material life, I want to become more powerful. When we are pursuing this, here spirituality is like a shock absorber. So here, whereas when it becomes spirituality becomes the goal transformer, we start pursuing something higher in life. It's not that if we have wealth, we want to give up our wealth. It's not that we don't want family. It's not that we don't want a respectable life. But we understand there is something more to life. So in the Sanskrit terminology, this is called artha. When we pursue things in the world, they have meaning. But here this is paramartha. Param is supreme. So there is meaning over here, but there is a supreme meaning. There is a greatest meaning when we turn towards the divine. So when does this happen? That we seek spiritual growth as a goal transformer. We start seeking something bigger, something beyond in our lives. Now that can happen in broadly two ways. The goal transformer, it's basically the material domain can sometimes become unbearable. So at that time, there must be so much distress. There must be something more. And that's when we start pursuing. So it may become unbearable. And that time we may start turning towards spirituality. But the other is that when it becomes unfulfilled. That means that, okay, I wanted wealth, I wanted a relationship, I wanted some reputation, I got those things. But those are not really fulfilling. There must be something more. So either of these can lead us to transform our goal. But when primarily it is because of suffering, because material life is unbearable, that's why we seek spiritual growth. Quite often it happens is, after some time life again becomes bearable. And then we feel, okay, yeah, maybe spiritual growth is not that important. But when we have had some goal that we very fervently sought in our lives, and then after great effort we achieve it, and then after that we find, hey, this is an anticlimax. I thought I got to the climax of my life, and it's anticlimax. So is there something more to life? So for me, this was how my spiritual journey started. I was born and brought up in India where the culture was normally spiritual. My family is also very pious. But I was never really interested in spirituality as such. India is a very education-centered country. So my dream was always that I wanted something higher in my life. I wanted to be higher in the sense that I wanted to be an academic achiever. So for me, actually, both these phases did happen. As a shock absorber and as a goal transformer. And when I came in, some of you may notice that I need crutches for walking. So when I was 1, I got polio. And since that time, I have never been able to walk normally. So I was just walking one day and I fell down. I don't remember that. But my earliest memory of this is probably I was 2.5, 3 or whatever. So I remember some neighbors or some relatives had come to our home and they were consoling my mother. It's so sad that your son got polio. And I remember my mother's voice very clear, confident. Is what he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually. Now I was probably 2.5, 3, and I don't know what intellectual signs I had shown at that time for my mother to make a statement like that. But somehow, because of that, 2 things happened. That, like, this was all subconscious. I realized this only a few years ago. So I started identifying much more with my intellectual side than my physical side. So although I couldn't play games like the other kids would play, but I like to study, I like to read, and I delighted in that. And along with that, somehow I didn't know who was this being called God, but I got that some conviction in the background that if we are lacking in some area, we will be provided for in some other. That the universe or whatever resource will not leave us completely bankrupt. So for me, that spiritual connection was basically, yeah, there are difficulties in life, it's a shock absorber. But then, as I said, my goal in life was, I wanted to be an academic achiever. I wanted to be number 1 in academic achievement. And I was always good in my studies. But somehow, The various factors just conspired or conspired, and I was never the first. I was sometimes the joint first, sometimes the teacher made some mistake in assessment, and although I had done better than other students, still I didn't get good that many marks. And I remember, and I told the teacher told me, you know, I made this mistake, I can't correct it. She said, no, but you know, it's a mistake. She told me that she was a new teacher, and she said that this was the first class that I announced, and it will be a red mark on my report if I tell that I reported wrong. She said, let it go. I felt very bad about it, and I said, okay, she's a teacher. So somehow I was never publicly celebrated as the first. And that was my very deep-rooted craving. Then I came to study engineering, and then I gave the GRE exam, which is given by non-Americans to come to America for higher studies. And there are 3 subjects in that. There is math, there is analytical ability, and there is English. So most Indians do well in analytical ability and English, and math, but English they struggle. But for me, since my childhood, one of my hobbies was just picking up a dictionary and memorizing words. So I just love English. And when I gave GRE, I came not only first in my college, I was first in the history of my college. I was first in the entire state of Maharashtra. There are several million people in it. And when I got the mark sheet by post, this was before the email age. So I was jubilant, oh, kind of thing. Yes, on top of the world. But after some time I realized that looking at the mark sheet doesn't really give much happiness. How long can you keep looking at it? So then all my friends came to know about it, and the entire university, which I was studying, almost everyone came to know about it. I was a celebrity in college. And I was delighted. But then somehow it happened that 3 of my friends, not very close friends, but whom I consider to be friends, they all forgot to congratulate me one by one. So, when the first friend forgot to congratulate me, I was annoyed. When the second friend forgot to congratulate me, I was irritated. When the third friend forgot to congratulate me, I was enraged. But I didn't want to sound pathetic. I cannot ask them, why are you not congratulating me? So at that time, it is almost as if I'm here, I had an out-of-body kind of experience. I felt as if I was looking at myself from above. And I felt, hey, wait a minute. You thought that achieving this will make you happy. This was your lifelong dream. And you have achieved it. But instead of becoming happy, you have become more dependent for your happiness on others. So, is this really the goal of your life? Now I started looking ahead in my life. What might I achieve? I might get into Ivy League University, I might win some scientific awards. But all of them would still keep me dependent on externals for my happiness. So, I started thinking, is there anything which provides intrinsic happiness that doesn't depend on the world recognizing me? So it is that time I encountered the Bhagavad-gita. And in the Bhagavad-gita, in 6.22, it is stated that what is the ultimate state of divine absorption? I thought of this as life's greatest achievement. Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha yasmin stito nirukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. It says that if you achieve this state of spiritual absorption, then you won't crave for anything else in life. And even if distress comes, you won't be disturbed by distress. So, the stage of spiritual absorption, it takes us beyond craving and beyond lamenting, resenting. So I started thinking that this is what I would like to achieve in life. I'm still on that journey, it's still a long, long way away. But what happened was that was the time when the driving goal of my life was transformed. So for all of us, we may have certain goals. We may want to have a good relationship, we may want to have good looks, we may want to have a lot of wealth. Nowadays, people's dreams, most young people, their dream is not so much how much wealth I have, it's more how much I become an influencer. I want a million Instagram followers or something like that. Okay, we may or may not get those things. But even if we get it, we come to realize that this is not fulfilling. It's not that it's not enjoyable. It's definitely enjoyable, but it's not fulfilling. If you're talking earlier about real satisfaction, deep satisfaction, that doesn't come with this. So when spirituality becomes a goal transformer for us, that's when we become steady on the path. That's when we can move forward steadily. So prior to that, what happens is, I started by talking about the relationship between God and the world. So when it's spiritual growth is simply as a, let's put it here, that is, there are means and there are ends. So when we are perceiving spiritual growth as a shock absorber, at that time God is the means and the world is the ends. I want power, I want wealth in this world. And while I'm on that journey, it's very difficult. So therefore I pray to God, I do some meditation, I stabilize myself. But when it becomes a goal transformer, like when our vision of spirituality changes to that it is a goal transformer, then God becomes the end and the world becomes the means. We may still seek wealth, but we seek wealth so that we can have financial stability, so that we can focus our mind on God. We seek wealth so that we can convert our home into a temple. We may still seek fame, but so that if we have some faith, then when we talk about the divine, when we talk about spirituality, others can become attracted. So this is, in one sense, a dramatic transformation in the value system. So this is where a person becomes, and this is the level when a person becomes steadily peaceful and then joyful. So I'll then now talk about the last part briefly. So I talked about what is spiritual growth, why we seek spiritual growth, and then how do we seek spiritual growth. So okay, can you just wait for a few minutes and just finish the session? We can have questions after that. So how do we seek spiritual growth? Essentially, the center, Krishna talks about abhyas and vairag. Now these words can be understood in many different ways, but we could put it as diligence and distance. Let me explain what this means. That the world can be endlessly enticing and entangling. We watch one movie, we go on YouTube and watch one movie, and then a dozen movie suggestions come up. We go on social media and look at one TikTok, and then 100 other TikToks come up. So basically, we can get so caught in the world that we'll have no time to focus on spirituality. So one of the things that we need to pursue spiritual growth is if I am here, then I need to create some boundaries between me and the world. Now, that does not mean we reject the world, but because we understand the world can be endlessly, it is first enticing. Hey, watch this, eat this, enjoy this. And then eventually it can become entangling. Just get caught in the complexities. So at least those things which are too enticing for us, which are too complicated, we keep a distance from. And that's why we have certain principles that we follow. We avoid eating meat, we avoid unrestrained sexual activity, we avoid intoxication, we avoid gambling. Now the point is not just these four activities. The point is what these four activities represent. That we don't want to get our mind too caught in the world. Because the more we are caught in the world will seem bigger and bigger and bigger for us. So we need to create some distance. We of course have to act in the world, we have to do our responsibilities, but we create some boundaries for ourselves. However, this is the secondary aspect. The much more important aspect is diligence. Now, diligence is in the remembrance of the Lord, in the remembrance of Krishna. So, why is this remembrance important? Two things. When we remember Krishna, see, basically our thoughts, they go in 100 directions. So, right now you are sitting, you will be hearing what I am speaking, but Bahushakha Yantash. You're thinking, okay, I will go home and do this. What is there for food today? I'm sitting on the ground, it's becoming uncomfortable. So many thoughts keep coming. And when a thought pops up, at that time, that thought appears as if it's the most important. It may not be important, but it appears important. So, when we direct our thoughts toward Krishna, by gradually, just as a practice, fixing our mind on Krishna, we start realizing the value of Krishna. That just by remembering Krishna, so, I think of 100 things. Some of them titillate me, some of them agitate me, but none of those thoughts stabilize me. None of those thoughts, they uplift me the way thinking about Krishna is. So that idea that Krishna is a bigger reality, it's not that suddenly that realization will come. It will come gradually. The practice that we realize is, okay, there is some time I focus on Krishna. Now I have my job, I have my family, I have my health issues, but sometime I will focus on Krishna. When we do that, gradually by the diligence, the importance or the value of remembering Krishna, that starts registering within us. But diligence also does one more thing. Diligence in remembrance of Krishna, that is a cure for our spiritual amnesia. So when somebody has amnesia, maybe they have been hit on the head and they don't remember anything. And one of the easiest ways, or one of the most time-tested ways for helping them recover their memory is to expose them to stimuli from their previous life. Now they will be taken back to their home, they will be thrown their clothes, their car. Now it's not that immediately the memory will come back in 1 minute. But all those stimuli, they are registered. And I have friends who are specialists in treating, doctors who are specialists in treating amnesia. They say even with all the knowledge of the brain that we have, the exact moment when a person's amnesia will recover their memory, that's just neither predictable nor understandable. And why that particular memory, particular time the memory comes back, when it comes back. So for us, when we are connecting with Krishna, when we are remembering Krishna, that is like a cure for our spiritual amnesia. It keeps every day when we sing the names of Krishna, when we chant the names of Krishna, when we study the scriptures, that is a prong, that is like a cure, a medicine for our spiritual condition. And then one day, suddenly, we'll get Krishna is not really matters. So this process of spiritual remembrance, it works like sunrise. What do you mean by work sunrise? See, the process of sun rising is gradual. At every moment the sun is rising, rising, rising. But our realization is sudden. Say we have gone for a morning walk. And then we go out maybe early in the morning when it's still dark or twilight. And then we are walking, maybe we are doing some mantra chanting or we're just moving around. And suddenly, hey, the sun has risen. So like that, now the sun didn't rise at the moment when we thought it was risen. It was rising continuously. So similarly for us, every day when we are doing our spiritual practices, if it isn't making any difference, I'm chanting the holy names, what's happening by that? But every day that we're chanting, the sun is rising, rising, rising. And suddenly one day we realize, hey, the sun has risen. Our life, we realize our life has been transformed. And that God has become the highest reality for us. And that is the time when we will feel internally strengthened, internally enriched, and be internally empowered to go through our life in a mood of service as we move towards Krishna. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. I discussed the topic of spiritual growth. So 3 questions: what it is, why we seek it, and how we seek it. So what is spiritual growth? Essentially I explained that when we begin our spiritual journey, the world is the bigger reality for us and God is a small reality. But as we grow spiritually, what happens is the world becomes a smaller reality and God becomes a much bigger reality. So this essentially is spiritual growth. And why do we seek spiritual growth? There could be many different motives, but we try to classify those 2 motives in into 2 broad categories. First is as a shock absorber. Life is tough and we want something unchanging to hold on to amid life's changes. And it's good if we come as a shock absorber also, come to seeking as a shock absorber. But eventually it becomes a goal transformer. It's not that, okay, I want wealth and the pursuit of wealth is very troubling. So I'll pray, I'll meditate. I may pursue wealth, but there is something bigger to pursue in life. So here, God is the means and the world is the ends. And that we pursue. But here, God becomes the ends and the world becomes the means. And how do we pursue spiritual growth? It's 2 steps. One is distance. We try to create some boundaries from the things that will consume our mind in the material world. And the second is diligence. We consciously strive to remember the Lord, remember Krishna. By this diligence, what happens? Firstly, we start realizing, we start appreciating the value of remembrance. And that diligence also is a cure for our spiritual amnesia. And in that way, for each one of us, the spiritual journey can become steady and steadily and increasingly meaningful and joyful for us. Thank you very much. Hare. Do we have time for questions? Yes, please. Any questions? There's a question you have? Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please. Do you have a mic or you can ask?
I'll just shout. Thank you for such an enlightening class. One question I had was, in the material world, it's very clear to measure kind of our goals and our progress towards those goals. For the spiritual growth, I understood from the lecture there are certain milestones you can use to measure that, but it might be a long journey. Should we be seeking to see how we're progressing? And if so, how do we measure that progress?
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, is spiritual growth measurable and should we even be trying to measure it? Well, we do need some parameters. If I'm doing something, am I on the right track? Because the spiritual domain is so subtle, we can't have parameters the same way we might have on a physical journey. So if you're climbing up a mountain, we have distance markers. And this far I have come, this far I have to go. It's not that so clear in the spiritual domain. But broadly, it is said Bhakti Pareshanubhava. That Bhakti gives us experience of God. Para Isha. That experience of God is what we get by the practice of Bhakti. And that leads to Viraktir Anyatraja. That so essentially, if we are growing in Bhakti, we are experiencing Krishna. And that makes us less enamored by worldly experiences. So basically, we can look at these two things. If we are growing spiritually, then we will be experiencing something so sweet, something so stabilizing, something so uplifting that we want to experience it more and more. So one of these tests of spiritual growth is that our desire for Krishna starts increasing. So, and by consequence, the other is that worldly experiences, they don't captivate us so much. Oh, I want to watch the sports match and I want to watch this movie and I want to do this and I want to do that. It's not so much that the rules that don't do this, don't do this. It's just that, that's not that important. So we don't crave so much for worldly experiences. So we can look at that. Like, are these two things happening? And another way to look at this is that basically, if we all want to elevate our attachments, in Bhakti we don't want to eliminate our attachments, we want to elevate our attachments. That means we are attached to things of this world, but we want to become attached to Krishna. So now how do we know what our attachments are and whether those attachments are changing? One simple way to know is, what do we think of when we have nothing to think of? What do we think of? Where do our thoughts go when we have nothing to think of? Nothing to think of means, see, sometimes life requires us to pay attention to things. If I'm driving on a crowded road, I have to pay attention to the road. But if I'm driving on a clear road with no distraction, nothing to really pay focus on, so where do my thoughts go? So if say I'm attached to money, my thoughts will immediately go to the bank and so I have this much money, I can invest here, I can invest, what happens here, what happens there. If somebody is infatuated by sexuality, that's where their thoughts go. Somebody is infatuated by fame, that's their thoughts go. So as we grow spiritually, the default state of our thoughts will be more and more toward Krishna. So if this is happening, when we have nothing to think of, maybe our thoughts automatically don't go toward Krishna. Still they may go toward the world. But with a little effort, we direct them toward Krishna and he stays there. So these are two broad parameters by which we can understand. Yes, please.
What are the obstacles we face when we are pursuing into spirituality in the form of any physical or mental? What are the obstacles we face when we are pursuing
Okay, good question. So So what are the obstacles on the spiritual path? Well, another class will not be enough for that. But broadly speaking, you can say the obstacles fall into categories: external and internal. External can be in the form of distractions or obligations. That means the world can consume us with so many distractions. Like social media, functionally we can use it, and we need to use it in today's world, most of us. But it can be very, 100 things can come. So the distractions can be from so many sources. And then, because we live in the world, there are some obligations we have. So sometimes the job may take too much time, sometimes our family responsibility may take too much time, sometimes our health may go down. So these are times when our focus on spirituality may slip away. Now it doesn't have to happen like that. We can try to decrease the distractions in our life. That's why we talk about boundaries. As respect to obligations, we understand that we are not renouncing the world, but we are redirecting our focus. So sometimes our obligations, they require more time. We need to give that time, but we don't forget our spiritual focus. This is what I'm required to right now. Let me do it. When I get the more time, I focus. Now, from internally, we have a mind and we have an intelligence. Our mind is associated more with our emotions and desires, and intelligence associated more with our reasoning faculty. So, from the mind, there can be desires. So our own desires can pop up and they can distract us. From the intelligence, there can be doubts. So basically, these four, internally and externally, are the obstacles on the spiritual path. Now with desires, how do we deal with it? Then we have to remind ourselves of, through, for example, through spiritual study, especially through spiritual association. Our desires are very much affected by our social circles. So if you are associating spiritually minded people, those who are focused on spiritual growth, then that desire will also, through a process of osmosis, social osmosis, that will start coming into our hearts also, our minds also. Now doubts, that's where we need to deal with those doubts. We need to ask questions. We need to have connection with people who can answer our questions, who can support us when those doubts sometimes start overwhelming or crippling us. So, but when if we study the sacred texts, they also give us a whole worldview within which doubts can be accommodated and addressed as they appropriate. So basically, these four, external and internal, are the obstacles. Okay? Thank you. So, thank you very much for your thoughtful participation. Hare Krishna.